Let's take a look at the classical variation in the Caro-Kann defense. So Caro-Kann is e4, c6. Play usually proceeds as follows. Bishop to f5 is the classical variation. Knight to g3, attacking the bishop, falls back to g6. White gains space on the king side, threatening to push the pawn to h5, trapping the bishop. So the bishop gives itself an escape square. And now knight to f3. And we made a video earlier featuring the move knight to d7 in this position. And the purpose of that move is to stop the white knight from coming to e5, posting itself strongly in the center and gaining a tempo on the g6 bishop. However, this move knight to d7 after knight to f3 is no longer the main line. You can call that the old main line. White usually follows up with h5, and now it's called the Spassky defense. Bishop falls back, bishops get traded, and you can see our earlier video. I'll put a link in the description that explores this position further. So instead of knight to d7 in this position, the main line has become knight to f6. So that allows the knight to come to e5 and gain a tempo on the bishop. So why does black do this? Well, black's plan is to develop their king side as quickly as possible. They don't want to waste a move with this queen's knight. They want to push to e6, get this bishop developed, castle kingside quickly. Black also wants to make the pawn break c5, and after the pawn breaks c5, sometimes if this black knight is still here, it can move to c6, a more active square than d7. Black also reasons that by luring the white knight forward, the white knight is no longer protecting the dark squares in the center. And sometimes black's queen's knight can trade itself for the e5 knight and simplify the position. So in general, concrete considerations in the position have shown that this knight posted on e5 isn't as big of a threat as it was once thought to be. So the main line continues bishop to h7, and now bishop to d3 is played to trade off with that powerful black bishop on h7. But a move that used to be played instead is bishop to c4, threatening a mate here on f7. Black blocks the mate with e6, and white can follow up with queen to e2, and we have a similar position that we saw in a video on the Karpov variation where white has played bishop to c4. And in that position, in the Karpov variation, this knight was on g5, but white has the same tactical resource. White is threatening to play knight takes f7, undermining the defense of the e6 pawn. So white would be able to follow that up with queen takes e6. So black has to respond precisely here. The move to play is knight to d5, blocking the effect of this bishop. Now there are a lot of different moves here that white has played, so I'm not going to go down this line any further. It has a lot of branches here. In fact, I think there are 12 moves in the Lichess database that white has tried. And this is no longer the main line anyway. I will illustrate the tactic, though. If you don't play knight to d5, you might make a mistake with a move such as bishop to d6. So that allows knight takes f7, forking the queen and the rook. And black can't take the knight because he'll get mated. Queen takes e6 check, and either the king goes back to f8 and then queen to f7 is mate, or it comes up to g6 and the black king can get mated by a pawn. Okay, so bishop to c4 does have this tactical point to it, but if black follows up correctly with knight to d5, then white doesn't really have an overwhelming position. White hasn't really realized their opening advantage. So bishop to c4 is no longer considered the main way of playing this opening. Instead, bishop to d3 is the main line, offering a trade of bishops here. This bishop on h7 is just too powerful to leave around. After bishop to d3, we should consider what happens if black takes this pawn that seems to be hanging. Well, the queen is loose on the square, and sometimes when you see a configuration like this, you've got a discovery. Like sometimes you can move the bishop and call check and then take the queen. We can't do that here. We can't call check. There's a pawn in the way. We can't call check. There's a pawn in the way. But there's a really nice tactic that leads to such a discovery, which is knight takes f7. And the point is the king cannot take the knight because we've drawn the king out, and now we can play a check with our bishop and win the queen. So if the king can't take the knight, what can black do? Well, black's rook in the corner is attacked, so what are some ways black can play? Well, black might give up that exchange, at least temporarily, and hope to trap the knight in the corner. For example, black might try bishop takes d3 here, allowing the knight to take the rook. And after that, black can play queen to e5 check, white can block the check, and black can withdraw their bishop to h7, and now black argues, well, the knight's trapped. It can't get out. And so black should get 2 pieces for that rook. Well, not so fast. There is another tactic in this position. White can actually break that knight out of the corner quite quickly and easily. What's the best move for white in this position? Maybe pause the video and try to find it. Okay, the best move here is queen to d8 check. Forcing king takes queen, and then we have this forking the queen and the king. So the king moves, we get the queen back, and we're up the exchange. Black can win a pawn here, but white should be able to win that position. So let's go back and try some more tactics here. So after knight takes f7, is there anything else black can try? Well, maybe moving the rook so it doesn't get taken. Well, after that, white has a very cunning sequence here of tactics that leave him ahead in the position. Starting with bishop to e3, attacking the queen. Now, queen takes b2 isn't anything to worry about. Rook to b1, for instance, can get this pawn back on b7. And we really have this knight to worry about, this bishop to worry about. We've got other things to worry about than queen takes b2. So the best move for this queen is to go back to d5 and attack that knight. But this allows bishop takes h7, attacking the rook, forcing the knight to capture back. But now white can get their knight out. White can play knight to g5, surprisingly. Why can white do that? Well, if black takes it with their pawn, that allows this tactic, this little fork, queen to h5 check, winning the knight back. Okay. So wait a minute, what if black trades queens now before taking the knight, so white doesn't get that fork? And black could have traded queens the move before as well. But after trading queens, if black takes the knight now, then white just has h takes g5, and notice this knight is under attack from the rook, and there's no way to save it. It can't take the pawn without getting captured. It can't go here. There are no safe squares. The best black might try here is guarding it. Okay, but that just runs into this move, and the rook is going to be taken if the knight moves. So white's going to get the material back, be a pawn up, and have a stronger position. So all of that is just to say that in this main line, after bishop to d3, black can't take that pawn. Okay, so what does black do? Well, they trade bishops. And then they continue on with their plan. They push e6. They try to get this bishop out, castle kingside. Okay. Now at this point, here are white's thoughts. I didn't mean to make that move. Let's erase that move. Here are white's thoughts. They want this knight to be strongly posted in the center and have an influence for as long as possible. They don't want black trading it off and capturing it like this. White also wants to castle queenside in this position. So there are a couple of ways to lend further support to this e5 knight in addition to that d4 pawn. One move in the position here is bishop to f4. Developing move, getting ready to castle queenside as intended, lending further support to the knight. It's a good move. But the main line is actually bishop to d2, and you'll see why in a second. Black plays knight b d7, trying to dislodge that powerful knight on e5, but white further supports it with a pawn move, f4. So that's deemed more powerful than putting the bishop on f4. And now black probably doesn't want to trade it off and give white a powerful pawn center here. So black will develop their kingside bishop and castle. You probably want to develop it to e7 rather than d6. If you put it on d6, then, well, for example, black can't take the knight on e5 with this queen's knight because after recapturing with a pawn, these minor pieces would be forked. So bishop to e7 is the preference there. White castles long, black castles short. And white has a good position. They have a slight edge here, more space, strong knight in the center, and at some point white might push their f-pawn further and attack. Okay, so I like white in this position. So that's the main line of the classical variation. So thanks for watching the video.